Hey there, Wargamers, Justin our Paint here, and today we're going to talk about Southern Assault 2022. I'd like to welcome you guys back to the channel, and I hope you guys had a good weekend. I'm not sure what day this will go up, so it may have been a little bit of a break between when Southern Assault 2022 happened and when this video goes up. I took some notes while I was at the event, and I wanted to talk about, in this video, my experiences while I was there. So I will try to have some photos of my games up. I didn't get as many as I wanted because I was into the game and focused and forgot to take some photos. But I can give you a shout out to the people I played in the order that I played them. I forget your last name, so if you guys happen to be listening to this, sorry. I played Samir, who's a really cool guy. He played Jade Falcon this year, and last year he played Great Death Legion. I was hoping to play as GDL again this year, but got to play as Jade Falcon. His models look great, but I got a soft spot for Inner Sphere stuff. So I played with David. David was a tough match because I was playing against Wolf's Dragoons, and he brought a lot of heat. But when we sat down to play, it was pretty cool because he was like, we're going to treat this as a training exercise. No one's really going to get hurt here. Afterwards, the guys are going to go all meet at the bar and talk about all the dumb crap that we did. And that's because we were both playing Wolf's Dragoons. Game 3, I played Kevin, who is a friend of Bobby's. He's actually been out to the Death Resign shop where I work, and I didn't know that. He was out there with Bobby, I guess, last year, working on some terrain. He was a lot of fun. He was playing Beta Galaxy Clan Wolf, which has a special place in my heart. Game 4, my toughest game of the weekend was against Carrie. I'm not sure what she was running. Custom force of sorts. I think it was like Clan Tech, 2C stuff. Infantry. It was a really brutal list. And it was painted in a custom paint scheme. She's got I think the podcast Miffed Kitten or something, so it's a custom paint scheme for her stuff. In game 5, I played against Matt LeBaird. I remember his name because A, I remember it just because I do, and B, he was a participant at Nova in the event that I ran this past summer, and then he was at Southern Assault, so I got to meet him again. And then my last game was against Mason. So let me back up. Matt was playing Sea Fox. We had almost a mirror match, not exactly, but we were both using Dark Age mechs. Both fielded a Savage Wolf, both fielded, I think, probably the same variant or close to it. And then we both fielded a Mad Dog, same variant, 9 damage short range, 6 damage medium range, same exact variant. My last game was against a young kid named Mason. A lot of fun. He was playing clan stuff, black and orange paint scheme, stuff that his father had painted for him. It was a nice game to end the weekend on because it was a little bit more casual. I did not want to take him, not for granted is not the word. I didn't want to underestimate, that's it. I didn't want to underestimate him for being a child because you never know. Like, kids could be good at games and the parents can coach them, you know? So, like, he also had a good list. But it was nice because he was not as interested in just like trying to play stompy. He was really trying to banter with me. He kept making jokes about, better watch out, I'm going to get a rear shot on you, stuff like that, and talking about positioning his battle armor and just full on banter. Before we get too deep into this, I'll mention this story. When I played against him, I have a habit of moving my fire moths last or as close to last as possible, which makes sense because you want them to get on someone's rear arc, right? You want them to deploy battle armor, throw out damage on the rear, get the bonuses, and so forth. So for multiple turns in a row, when I was playing with him, I did this, and then one turn I finally got initiative, and I would have the last move, and he's waiting. My second to last move, I moved my fire moth. And he looked at me, he goes, why did you do that? You've moved that last every time. I've been waiting on that. Why'd you do it? I was like, well, gotta do something else. Gotta be a little tricky. And I had baited out a bunch of moves, and I moved the fire moth second to last because it allowed another model to move, and he was hoping I was going to move that model first so he'd get the jump on it, and I knew that, so I went ahead and moved the fire moth and caught him off guard, but he saw the trend and thought I was going to stick with it and didn't. So that was kind of funny seeing his reaction when this all went down, but it was all in good fun. I actually gave him my vote for best sportsman. That was pretty cool. I gave maximum sportsmanship scores to everyone I played, but we had to vote for like our favorite opponent, and I put him because it was just the most relaxed game of the 2-day period. I didn't beat him by a huge margin. I think it was like 1 or 2 points or something. It was pretty small, but it was nice to play with someone who was interested in bantering and not just worried about winning. And honestly, most of my games are probably that way, but I had a lot of fun with him. I also got to help coach a little bit, and he gave me a pair of dice. I don't have them right here. I was going to grab them before the video, and I didn't, but I gave him my tokens, and because I could just cut them from DRD because I worked there, and I gave him my 2 models that I got for participating. I got a Flea and a DRD mini, and I gave them to him. I was like, A, I don't need the Flea, and B, I make help produce the DRD mini, so I can just make one if I want one. I figured if I give these to this kid, like, he'll get more minis and he'll be more excited to play. So he gave me a pair of dice. He said these were his crit dice and they had not rolled well all day. And I grabbed them, I looked at them, I said, I'm gonna roll 12s right here. Watch. I rolled them. I didn't roll 12s, but I did roll double 5s, and I was like, close enough. So that was pretty cool. Fun experience. So I will get into talking about the gameplay in a moment, but I do want to talk about kind of Southern Assault in general. I saw some comments online where people may have not had a good time, or I'm not saying had a good time, specifically this post, the guy wasn't happy with the way the packet was, but this particular individual had not actually went to play. I've been there back to back. I went to 2021 and 2022, and I think 2022 was better than 2021. So right out the gate, for Bobby's packet, this is 375 points for this year. Last year it was 350. I think given a slight critique for the event here, right out the gate, 375 in my opinion is a mistake. In my humble opinion, as someone who was a TO for about 13 years or so for various games, there's something to be said for being able to finish rounds. And last year, I think the average player struggled to get halfway through the 10-round limits that the majority, if not all, of his scenarios had at 350. And we went up in more points this year and played the almost the same exact scenario. So I felt going up in points was poor. Still played it, still had a good time, but if it was me, I would have preferred to have played at 300 level. I think the games go a little faster. That's why at Nova, my event was at 250 to encourage some different list building and have speedier games, so everyone had a realistic chance to get to the end turns and play it out, and have both players have ample time to try and win. In hindsight, I could have had, for my event specifically, could have had shorter rounds or slightly higher points, which is why I was thinking either shorter rounds or 300 points, because in most of the games that were at my event, people finished considerably early. So I'm going through his packet here. There's general information, if I can get my paper. And this is all on his Facebook page, so we're not going to go through this verbatim here. We're just going to flip through and find the main stuff that was interesting. So we played on 4x4 tables. I know for Battletech Alpha Strike, I think some people play on something by 42, but 4x4 is fine. Standard, actually this was only 75% of your list had to be painted, 3-color minimum. That's a little bit below standard for most events. Most events, 3-color minimum's pretty standard. This one was pretty casual, where if you had a little bit of bare plastic, you were fine. I didn't have an issue with that, and honestly, I think last year there were some grumbles about the painting, but from my experience this year, the number of players was higher. We went from low 30s last year to mid 50s-ish this year, and the paint jobs went up. The quality of paint jobs that were present were amazing, and no grumbles this year. So that was cool. And even then, at the bare minimum for painting, this is not particularly difficult for people to achieve. Put a little effort and you're good to go. Doesn't have to be Golden Demon worthy, so to speak. Just needs to be done so both players have a nice immersive experience. And at Bobby's event, every table is basically different. So everyone having the models painted for the thematic tables that Bobby set up for everyone just made for a better experience all in all for everyone. So every time you sat down at a table to play, you had your cool minis, your opponent was going to have mostly painted, fully painted minis too. So when you sat down, it felt immersive. So that was pretty cool. In terms of list building, he's got some breakdown on requirements here. For the most part, I think that this year wasn't too bad. I think last year I was particularly worried about artillery. That was the boogeyman. But the big deal that Bobby had for this year, I think it's going to be over here. Okay, so this is the skills. Okay. I'm not sure exactly where the pertinent exact part is, but we'll explain it. in the list building requirements for the event this year, Bobby had it to where you had to basically pick like an era-ish and a faction-ish. So within reason, you would pick an era or block for a specific faction, whether that was Intersphere General, Clan General, mercenaries, or if you want to do a specific clan, specific house, specific merc unit, and whatever, and then build your group of models based on what those that faction would use in that timeline. So if you're playing Grey Death Legion in 3150 Dark Age, I don't know what the heck they're using them, but if you were doing that, there are certain mechs that would be in their pool that may not be there now, or excuse me, there's certain mechs that would have been in their pool in 3052 that may not be there in 3150. So they were a bit more of a stickler on fluff. It wasn't too bad. I still feel like there were probably less than 10%, but probably close to 10%, somewhere in there, of the players had pretty competitive lists, even with the fluff restrictions. But last year at Bobby's event, there were some pretty brutal lists because they could cherry pick. You could go from, Star League to Ill Clan, anything between, and cherry pick the best units. And this time that was a no-go. If you were picking models from the Jihad, all your stuff had to come generally from roughly that era. You couldn't cherry pick a model from the Dark Age and then cherry pick a model from the Jihad if that model did not exist in the Ill Clan era or the Dark Age era. So it helped narrow the scope of list building to be a little bit more specific and helped eliminate cherry picking. Do I think it was perfect? No. Do I think it was better than last year? Yes. And do I hope he does it again? Yes. I think it was way better. I think all the lists for the most part were better. There's still a little bit of cheesery, which we'll get into later. But I liked the list building requirements. So basically had it set up where you could have 2 of any one unit, and if it was a mech, you could have 2 of any one chassis, but they couldn't be the same variant. So you could have 2 Mad Cats if they were 2 different Mad Cats. Essentially the rules and stuff that he used here are pretty boilerplate standard, things that I pretty much already do. Again, we're not going to go too much into it, but if you want to check out his packet, it's on his Facebook page. The big deal is the dice attacks, multiple dice rolls. This was clarified a little bit more this year, but basically doing the pairs of dice per attack. So if you had 5 damage, you would roll 5 pairs of dice. So that was good. That's in the back of the Alpha Strike book. And then on day 1 before the first game, he went ahead and notified the group or the players that he was making everyone pick a crit pair, which is how I play. And quick rundown on that: in standard Alpha Strike, every unit has a 1 in 36 chance to crit, because in standard Alpha Strike you roll 1 pair of dice and it's all or nothing, right? On boxcars you crit. That's the way it works. If you do the multiple attack rolls, right, and you do not lock in a specific crit pair, you could never get more than 1 crit off of the damage roll unless you went into structure and had a boxcar. You could get 2. That would be the only way, but you wouldn't get multiple boxcar crits. However, if you don't select or make players select a crit pair, air quotes, the odds of getting a critical go up, right? So if in standard Alpha Strike every unit has a 1 in 36, but then you go into multiple attack rolls, units with lots of damage have way more 1 in 36 chances every time they roll, right? So let's say a dire wolf with 10 damage in standard Alpha Strike has 1 in 36 chance to crit, right? With the multiple attack rolls, it has 10 damage. That's 10 pairs of dice, 10 chances to roll boxcars. So the chances of it occurring are much higher. And I think that the reason people don't do that, or that they have the crit pair, is they want to make sure that that is standard across the board. Everyone has a 1 in 36. No one gets an advantage from using this. This makes it more likely to get variable damage, which is fun. But the crit thing without the pair, I think, adds a spread that is unintended. So he made that call at the beginning. That's how I've always played, and I think that was good. That's how I did it at Nova as well. He also did it where damage on the rear adds a pair of dice to your pool. I don't do that. When I play, I generally do it where if you roll an attack on the rear, so long as you hit and deal damage, you do +1. The reason I don't do it the way Bobby did is that a mech with a really low skill gets another chance to do a damage, right? Whereas I think the intention of a rear shot is you might hit something weak, not an extra chance to hit. Your odds of hitting shouldn't go up. The percentage damage should go up. So the way I do it is, if you're a fire moth and you do 2 damage and you're on someone's rear, If you roll and either one of those hit, you get +1, right? If both hit, you do 3 damage total. If only one hits, you do 2. But you only made 2 rolls instead of 3, if that makes sense. So that's a small thing. It didn't make a huge difference as long as it was consistent. Last year, there were people doing it both ways, and they were confused. The packet said one thing, people were doing another. There was a ruling that was on the other side, and it was a bit of a snafu last year. This year, it was very, very much so clarified. And even if I do it differently for my event, and for me personally, when I play outside of Southern Assault, his ruling worked just fine, so long as both players know exactly how they're doing it. Line of sight and stuff is pretty standard. And yeah, okay, so I think this is where... No, that's the army count. That wasn't the building. They had the quiz. I was really hoping that he was going to have a list of all of the events in the packet, or the missions. He didn't. And that was unfortunate because you didn't know the missions until day of. I get that, but I think that the... Sorry, I had to get a little... I was wanting to drink. My mouth was parched. My throat was parched. So... I get why he wouldn't have the missions posted ahead of time, but after seeing the more competitive lists play, I think there's no denying that combined arms is very powerful in Alpha Strike, which makes sense. But if players knew ahead of time what to expect, they may build differently, which one might argue that is why you don't have the missions visible. On the flip side, if someone comes from out of town and they built a all mech list, for example, and didn't bring something a bit more well-rounded, they may have driven very long distance. We had people coming from out of state to play, and then you may not have a list that is versatile enough to play the mission. So at Nova, I posted my mission packet up well in advance so people could build. That does lead to some more tailored lists for the event, but it means no one comes in with a list that they're just, oh crap, I can't play. That doesn't happen. So I don't think that was a big deal at Bobby's event, but I do think the players who have played in Southern Assault 2021 had more of an idea what to expect. So they brought tanks, they brought VTOLs, they brought hovercraft, they brought infantry, things like that. So the top 2 lists had combined arms, mechs, transports, infantry. And that was a big deal. The infantry were huge. It was huge for scoring objectives. I placed top 7, and I ran 2 battle armor and 8 mechs. And I'm shocked I placed in top, or placed 7th overall. Last year I had 10 mechs, 2 battle armor, and I think I did better last year. I think I won all 6 games. They were just marginal victories, so I didn't place first. This year I went 4-2 with a list I felt was subpar, but it was fun. But for the same reason that the infantry are very powerful in Alpha Strike, at least in the event, as the same reason on my list last year I felt did better. I had more models to move, more things to score with. So do I think Southern Assault 2023 players will have better lists? Probably. I think the top scoring players will continue to be the top scoring players because they know how to list build and they know how to play. Anyone who shows up at the the third iteration of Southern Assault, Southern Assault 3, if they show up and they've played in 1 or 2 of the previous ones, they will have more of an idea what to expect. I think the lists will vary, so I think that the competition next year may be a bit more stiff. So we'll see. That being said, let me talk about the opponents that I played and discuss the kind of mission breakdown for what we did. So I played Samir in game 1 against his Jade Falcons, and I won. It was almost a tabling. I think he had 1 or 2 mechs left on the table when we ended, maybe. It was pretty rough. Let me grab a piece of paper here. I'll actually show you kind of what happened. So when we deployed, so we're playing on a 4x4, right? So 4x4. We had an 8-inch deployment, so 8. And we had various terrain features. He had brought 8 clan mechs to our game, which I gave him a little jab. I was like, I mean, your models look real good, bud, but you brought 8 instead of 10. Why not bring 2 stars? Make it work. And I, gave him a little jab, but I was trolling him. He laughed. That's me. Like, I like to be fluffy, and I feel like, if you're playing clans and you bring more than 5 mechs, go to 10. That's what you do. But anyway, we had some kind of a rocky objective or obstacle in the middle and some various ones kind of on the side and stuff. So he pushed forward with his force, and he had the bulk of it kind of right here in this position. And I had think there was a kind of rocky feature here, and I had the bulk of my force kind of in this department, right? So he pushed forward head on to fight me, and then I had my fire moths on the side, right? So I had, I think it was four mechs here, and then like 2 mechs here, right? And then my fire moths did this kind of number, and he had pushed all of his mechs forward straight at me. So at one point, I think I have a picture of this. I'll try and show it. At one point in the middle of the table, he had 4 mechs, kind of like this stack. Actually, it was 5 because the assault mech was in the front. And then I had a little bit of cover on one, so kind of like a rock, right? And then one of my mechs, and then we're kind of looking like something like that or something. Right, but at the end of the movement on this particular turn, maybe it was like turn 2 or something, as his mechs pushed forward in, he had a couple off to the side, but for the most part, we were in this kind of fighting zone here. As he pushed forward, my fire moths came around the rear, and they were kind of set up like this. Whatever, it's terrible. And then, so I got behind his mechs, and then I dropped my infantry right behind him. So he was staring down at like 4 big mechs here, and then 2 small mechs, or 2 medium mechs on the side. I think it was my Storm Wolf and my Dominator, and then the Fire Moths here. And then he had basically the majority of his force here, and then a little bit off to the side. And he was taking rear shots and forward shots, and he was really pinched in. Now, do I think Samir was dumb? I absolutely don't. So the reason this occurred is in our game, A, he's playing Jade Falcon. B, he tried to build it as fluffy as possible. And C, afterwards, when we're scoring each other, he was telling me that he tried to play the Force fluffy. And he came straight at me. He wasn't going to hide. He wanted to fight. That's what clanners do. And then me being the Wolf's Dragoons, Dark Age era, grimy mercenaries that I am, we will take that fight, and then we will take any advantage we can to win, because you can't be a merc if you're dead. So I did make a joke about the Jade Falcons thinking that we were super dishonorable, inner sphere scum or whatever, because we're shooting them in the rear, but at the end of the day, mechs were still alive, right? But I gave him, when we scored list comp, you gave, it was a 1 to 20 scale, right? 1 being brutal, 20 being like they can't win. So super fluffy, super cheese. And I gave him a 20, and he's the only person I did that to. And I told him, I was like, I'm not trying to be insulting. I don't think your list was a pushover, but you fielded a fluffy list and played it fluffy, and that hurt you in the rankings. And the higher your like army comp score is, the better, because a player thinks that your list was very casual, and that helps compensate or offset, your rankings or your sportsmanship, things like that. If you win all your games, but your comp score is all a 1 and you're tied with someone, that may deviate where you place, right? Because winning's not everything. So I told him, I was like, if you're not gonna be insulted, like, I'm gonna hit you with the 20, because I think that you've brought a fluffy list and you played it fluffy, and you should get a benefit. The score doesn't reflect what you brought to the table for me as the opponent to enjoy. We both had really beautifully painted models, in my opinion. He's a lot of fun to play with. The banter with him is really chill. He's a super cool guy. If you guys ever have an opportunity to come to Southern Assault, A, I hope you come out, and B, it would be you'd be lucky to be able to play with Samir. He's one of the chillest dudes I've played. I'm glad I played him 2 years in a row. It's unfortunate I had to play him in game 1. Last year, I think I played him in game 4. So anyways, that was a good game. And like I said, I think him getting some points from me in some capacity that would help offset something was worth it, because he did a service to me. I don't think I got like a landslide set of points and whatnot off of the game, but he had pretty models. I had pretty models. It was an awesome table. He played them fluffy, and it's a 100 out of 100 experience, right? So I felt like this was a way to give him something for it. So that was a very fun game. Now game 2. I was playing with David, and I'm trying to remember what our scenario was. Oh, right. Okay, so the scenario with David, he's playing Wolf's Dragoons. So we are playing on a 4x4 again. Obviously, it's going to be this way for all of them, 8-inch deployment. And in the center of the table is an objective. The only way to get this objective is to become base-to-base contact with it, spend a turn without doing anything. So move up, that's the first turn. Second turn, do nothing. And if you end a turn, or if you spent a full round not moving, so 0 TMM, on that contact with the objective, then your mech could pick it up and walk away with it. That means that mech's going to get obliterated. So in our game, he had off to the side, there was a pool of water. All right. And there was some, actually, rather, there was trees. Then there was a pool of water over here. I had some trees, right? So he staged up with his forces kind of here, and I staged up with mine here. And there was a big blocking thing in the middle that the objective was sitting on. And we engaged. We, fired back and forth at each other through the woods. And I realized I was not going to win this firefight. He had a fast mech, a Viper, that he threw up the edge at me on the side. And again, my whole force was basically sitting right here. He had a Viper here. He had the majority, I forget how many mechs he had, the majority of his mechs here. And then he brought up a hovercraft here with some infantry, 2 flame infantry in here. And then he had some battle armor. It was very common to see lists with 2 standard infantry and 2 battle armor. That was the standard. Almost every list I played that had infantry, they followed that. That was very common. Now, the number of troop transports varied. This one, he had 1 hover with 2 flame infantry, and then he had, I believe, 2 battle armor with heat, and then mechs with heat. So, because the trees set up here, this one was actually a bit further forward, I was able to back with the bulk of my force up here, and then the trees that he was firing through were 7 inches, or beyond 7 inches or whatever. So, these mechs ended up having to shift to the water. He shifted his Massacre over to this objective here. So Massacre sitting here, mechs sitting in the water now. And we started exchanging fire a little bit around the side of the trees so you could see me. But I limited what he could fire at to a limited number of mechs. And at this point, I'm down material. He's taken out one of my mechs, my Timberwolf, my big baddie, the 7 damage Timberwolf I'm running. He's got him. He's got heat on him. He's got damage on him. He's literally running. He's retreated to the back. But he moves this Massacre up. I'm down material. I'm losing the game. I shift all my models over to the side, and then I'm able to focus fire almost everything in one turn on that Massacre. And I limited these, like I think I had 2 mechs here and a Viper, something like that could see a little bit. I ended up clearing the Viper and then limiting what he could shoot me with here with these guys, and then was able to get a lane, firing lane on the Massacre with almost, if not all of my mechs, and I downed it. And when I downed that Massacre, this whole area, this whole like left flank of the table started to fall to the left side. It started to shift over because I took out one of his heavy hitters, which was brutal. At this point, I was considering conceding because I was losing pretty badly, and there's a chance he was going to get this objective, and I couldn't do much about it. The heat was brutal, the list was brutal, and then I took that out. He also had, I forgot to mention this, he had a guy. I'd ran my Fire Moths. One came to intercept over here, and then one ran up this direction. He had a skill 3 Warhammer had parked here and was basically sitting there every turn, so he's sitting on a skill 2 most of the game, just firing long range at me. I ran up at him. I think it was actually turn 1. I have a 30-inch move Fire Moth, and I caught him with some rear shots, did some damage. He then backed up his mech to the edge of the table, so I couldn't hit the rear of him. And then I kind of proceeded to ignore him. There's nothing I could do. But this little Fire Moth here, this is the MVP. So we fast forward, we've exchanged fire, we've done a bunch of damage. And this game I distinctly remember because I gave him some advice on his Warhammer. I usually offer that to opponents, especially if they're very casual, more chill. If I don't feel like you're being kind of dickish with me, I'm generally a very nice person. I'll give you advice, I'll ask questions, takesy backsies, fix it, let's both have a good time, right? So he was so worried about my my Fire Moth coming back to hit him, and this Fire Moth had 4 damage and a 3 damage infantry, and his Warhammer was in pretty good shape. I couldn't one-shot him, and I couldn't get on his rear. But he was really worried about his TMM, right? And I told him, I was like, hey, do you want some advice with this Warhammer? And he's like, yeah, sure. I was like, why don't you just be stationary with it? You're firing at long range. You have long range damage. My long range is minimum. Your skill's higher. If you're stationary, you're skill 2 now. You're already hitting at long range. It's going to make it easier for you, and it's going to negate some of my TMM or some of my cover, whatever. Like, you're pretty good. And he's like, well, I'm really worried about you coming at me with that Fire Moth. And I was like, I don't think I can one-shot you. And if I drop him in front of you and not on your rear, and I hit you, you just turn around and kill me, right? You were stationary. You're skill 2 at that point. My Fire Moth's TMM 4. You need 6s to hit, and you only got to do 2 damage. You're going to kill it, right? I was like, the odds are I'm not going to stand there in front of you. I could, but who knows? So he remained stationary. My fire moth ends up rotating over here to get behind these guys and do something. And there were some trees or hills sitting kind of in this area. And then he proceeds to fire over at my fire moth, and that stationary negated the obscurity because the hills blocked half the fire moth. Straight ignored it, and he almost killed it. Granted, almost, you only got to do 2 damage. But this guy was my MVP. He was my fastest model on the table. And at this point, this sketch looks ridiculous. I'm sorry. Hopefully, if you've watched this, you're following what these marks meant. But this fire moth was my fastest model on the table at 30 inches, right? And at this point, I was down some mechs early. He beat up on me. I shifted the battle, and we're pretty even tit for tat on mechs. And then I look at the packet, and I start reading these secondary objectives, which if you ever play at Southern Assault, read the packet, read the missions before you play. Always know what your scoring objectives are, because if you can't play the main game, you can play the secondaries. And neither one of us were going to get this objective. I read the secondary objectives, and if my fastest unit was still alive, I got +1 point for the game. I had killed his fastest one. There was a big hill right here. I took this dude, sprinted over here. Didn't care about shooting, didn't care about the infantry. I needed to get out of line of sight. And I spent the last 2 turns running to get hidden. And then we ended the game. We were 14-14. And then I got +1 for having the surviving fast mech. So it was a 14-15 game. I won by 1 point. 1 point. That guy surviving did it, and his Warhammer stationary, with my advice, almost killed him. Like, I got lucky, but it negated that cover that I had. It's almost killed him. So that second objective was huge. We ended the game, and I told David, I was like, dude, that was close, man. We also had some rules questions come up about heat and TMM, and I didn't know this. I missed it. So for every 2 points of heat you have on you, I believe is what it is, you reduce your TMM by 1. I didn't know that. He couldn't find it in the book to show me. I had never seen it. It's not listed on the unit cards. So I learned something from that game. And because I did that wrong on day 2 and I came back, I flagged him down in the morning. I was like, David, I looked at that rule last night and I found it. I was wrong. Sorry. Like, here, I found the right ruling, So I'm always a person, if I get something wrong and I see it and then I see you again, I will try and let you know that I've corrected it and apologize for any rules mishap. It happens in any game you play. Just be honest with yourself. You know what I mean? So that was game 2 with David. So game 3, going into that with Kevin. So again, we had 4x4, right? 8-inch deploy, so standard. This was when he was playing the Clan Wolf Beta Galaxy, and we had plenty of intervening terrain and such here. So in our game here, he deployed like this. He had, I think it was not a Nova, Stormcrow. I think it was a Stormcrow here. I deployed the bulk of my force here, right? And as he saw me deploying my models, he offset a bunch of his mechs on this side, right? And then he put 2 VTOLs over here. Clearly, we had more than 4 mechs apiece, but for visualization. He then proceeded to move the Stormcrow up here to get a little bit of cover. So he was behind like a wall partially. I could see him, he could see me. I was able to Congo line all of these dudes in roughly this position to see him. And these guys pushed up to some cover here. And then he ran some light mechs, I think that were like here, and he kind of ran them around like this, multiple turns in a row. But on turn 1, I was able to shoot and down the Stormcrow, and then I was able to weather the fire long range. I managed to keep my stuff, the majority, I think maybe 1 mech wasn't, in long range from all this stuff right here. But I got a Stormcrow down, and then I'll get to some of the tactics of what's going on here in a moment. But he took his Ballocks, which were what these VTOLs were, and he flies them this way, and then he flies them this way, and then he flies them back. He wasn't sure kind of what he wanted to do with them. So it was like boom, 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 which means they weren't shooting at me or doing anything. And then these lights skirted the edge of the table because he was ostensibly wanted to get behind me and flank. But he took them out of the fight. Wasn't going to waste shots at long range, so he forced my hand to shoot at other stuff. Whereas sometimes lights got to be danger close. You got to get in your opponent's face and harass him, or be more direct. So going the long way took multiple turns, being indecisive with the Ballocks, wasn't very helpful for them because they do a lot of damage on the rear. They could have taken out my fire moths, which pushed up the side. My fire moths ran straight this way. So anyways, went around the side, waffled with his Balax, lost his Stormcrow on turn 1. I noted when I drew the little square here, this was the middle of the map, the deployment. So in this scenario, for every model you had on the opponent's side of the table at the end of the game, you got 1 point. On turn 1, I took out one of his models, and we had the same number of minis at the start of the game, which meant that he was down material and I was up by 1, and all I had to do was play safe and push into his side of the table. And if he did so in kind and ran over here, we'll exchange some long-range shots. It's not enough to take anything out. But if he does that and I do this, I've still got the game, right? So now the onus, I think that's the right term, it is on him to push to me to take out a model and even it and get another model and get the edge, and then I have to fight him back, right, in my zone. So between turn 2 and 3, I was able to down a Balak with my mechs. I was able to get lines of fire on him, get some lucky shots, take him out. And at this point, he was studying the table, and I had shifted these mechs. They had all went kind of this way, while these ones had pushed forward, keeping them at long range and keeping the Balaks in medium range to try and maximize the potential chance of hitting them, because they're really hard to hit, and minimize these guys' chance of hurting me because his mechs were heavy hitters. So I had shifted. So like my mechs were facing, if we're thinking of the battlefield, right? My mechs were facing that way on the table, and then I shifted towards my left side, and all my mechs were doing this now. I guess I drew the hex wrong, but they're facing that way. So I did like a shift to face him. As I moved, I was starting to shift and aim this way because that's where he was coming from. And then we took a moment on, I think it was turn 3 maybe, however the math turned out. And he was looking at the table for a long time, looking at the map, and he was apologizing for taking too long. And I was like, take your time, man. You're good. It's fine. Like, whatever. I'm not going to be that guy that rush you. I'm here to have fun. Honestly, I placed higher than I expected. I was there for the painting comp, right? So anyway, we got to a point where he's taking a few minutes to think, and then I said, I could tell you got your gears are turning right now, bud. Like, I'm pretty sure that you've now deduced by looking at the table that I am up on kills, and you see where I'm moving, and you now know that you have to fight me and kill me to get to take points away, and you have to do it on this side of the table to do that. Else I'm going to win, and that's going to be really hard for you to get 2 kills plus a third to get ahead and then retreat back, right? And then he looked and he goes, yeah, that's what I'm figuring. And I was like, yep. I'm not going to run and hide from you. I could have just sprinted all my mechs and hid behind terrain for the rest of the game. I said, I'm not going to do that to you because that's boring. I said, what I am going to do, which was this, I said, I will continue to push into your zone because that is the tactically smart decision. I said, I will turn and face you as I do it, and I will exchange fire and fight you because that's fun and we're here to roll dice. I said, but logic dictates I go to this corner into your zone and make you fight me. I'm not going to just sit in my zone and not move, but I'm not going to hide from you either because, we want to roll dice and have a good time. And then somewhere in the conversation it came up, about conceding, and I was like, hey, bud, you paid to be here. I paid to be here. If you want to have a good time, you want to roll dice, I said, we'll play it out. I'll play it out and roll dice with you. I said, but if you're not having fun and you want to just end it and you want to call it, I said, I'm happy to end it right here. We'll just call the points the way they are and we'll bullshit. And he said, let's bullshit. So we called the game right there and we talked for about 45 minutes. Everything under the sun. He's a really nice guy. I don't remember his last name, but he's a pretty cool dude. This is a spot I'd like to take a moment and talk about sportsmanship. I could have pushed for a higher margin of victory. Every one of his models that I killed was going to make my spread better because I would have more models alive than him. So my victory margin was going to be higher. I didn't push for that because he wasn't going to have fun, and honestly, I probably wasn't going to have fun playing that way. Did that hurt my standings? Probably, but I'm not playing in that event to win money or anything. I'm playing in that event to play with you, not against you. Yes, we are pitted against each other in the sense that this is a game, but when I sit down to play, the person on the other side of the table is important. I want to see your cool models, whether you are a new painter, an expert painter, or somewhere in between. I want to see the narrative you brought to life on the table for me. I want you to see the narrative I brought to life on the table for you, and I want those two armies to clash, and I want to have a cool thematic experience. This battle was decided. We knew who won. for my sake, I wasn't worried about pushing for the points. The rest of his time there for that session he felt was better spent talking with me and just having a good time being social. Happy to do that. Hurt me in the standings, but I didn't care. So remember that sportsmanship and the person on the other side of the table is important. Your opinions may vary, but I promise you, if you approach gaming the majority of the time with this kind of philosophy, with having a good time and winning, and not just having a good time winning, like that's two different things. Like you want to have fun while winning, not just having fun when you win. Players will have more fun with you, and you will have a better community. As a former TO for over a decade, I have seen many game communities come and go because people get so focused on winning they forget about the community, right? So this type of thing, that's a learning experience for people if you've never considered it. Remember, like if your opponent's not having fun, you're probably having less fun too. So consider that. So going into game 4, this was my the hardest game of the whole weekend, and we'll have a little bit of a talking point for this. This one was against Carrie. Carrie's list was very brutal. It's the only list I think I rated below the average fluff threshold. So Bobby's scoring was 1 to 20, for 1 being like cheese, 20 being ultra fluff. I rated my own list as a 10. I think my list should have been probably between a 9 and 11, depending on who I'm playing against. Average. That's the way I viewed it. Average. I don't think it's ultra fluffy, even though it kind of was. But I don't think it was super cheese. For me, middle ground seems the most fair. I rated hers at a 9 because it was pretty competitive. I would imagine other people might have voted it less. So when I played with Carrie, we're playing on a 4x4. Same 8-inch deployment. This one had 3 objectives in the middle. I lost this game basically on turn 1. I played it out as best I could, got some kills, but here was the crux of the issue. My forces were deployed here so that I could threaten all 3 objectives based on how she deployed. Turn 1, she took 2 spider mechs with very high jump jets here that had the potential to jump jet over here, back and forth if they wanted to. And she took 2 hovercraft and drove them forward, like so. And on turn 1, on the center objectives, she had, she was slightly out of this one because of the terrain, but had 2 infantry and a hover tank just outside. And this one, she had 2 infantry and a hover tank, all within range. So on turn 1, for me to stop her from scoring the front 3 objectives, I needed to clear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units, almost 8 off of them to clear all 3 objectives. Statistically, I really wanted to clear 2, which I tried. I was able to clear the infantry here and the stuff here. It took everything. Could not clear these, and I started losing material. I was able to, I think I scored 2 points on turn 1, because I think I threw units here. I had, I think it was might have been my Stormwolf middle, and then like a Dominator and a Fire Moth or something on these 2 objectives. So turn 1, I got, I think, 2 points. She got 1. Turn 3, I promptly started losing material. She shoved the rest of her models up on the objectives, and I lost every turn after that. And this is where I noticed what was very useful in the tournament, and that is infantry and transport. So she was running 2 Omni hover vehicles. So she had I forget what it's called, some kind of wheeled battle armor inside of the vehicles, and then a mechanized armor on the outside that could ride it. So 1 transport vehicle bringing 2 battle armor each, and you could dump those on objectives. They aren't super hard to kill, not super easy, and you can't ignore them. If you ignore them, it's free shots. And during the game, she was like, well, I'm shocked that you shot all the infantry first. Most people don't. And I was like, here's the deal. One of those infantry, I think, had like 5 damage. I was like, if I don't shoot those on turn 1, that's by turn 2, that's 10 damage you've rolled. That's free, uncontested. I have to shoot them. But any shots on this infantry, I also have to make to clear objectives. It's also shots not going on her mechs, right? So it was very, very brutal. Now, this is another instance where I had a sportsmanship thing come up, I think. On the left side, on this objective right here, there were some trees, and the trees were positioned kind of like this. That looks really stupid, but the bases were overlapping, right? So right in the center, she plopped a mech right here. And the trees were all like sprouting up. they're all individual trees. So like imagine like the base plates overlapping to make this thing. She passed turn. She's like, okay, pass, I'm done. Something like that. She might not sound like that. I just do voices trying to, differentiate between me and someone else when I'm discussing it. And I said, I cannot, in good conscience, let you pass turn, and having forgot something. It's in my best interest to let you forget, but I can't in good conscience morally let you. And I was like, you forgot to shoot with everything. And she goes, oh, really? What did I miss? So I pointed down to this mech in the woods who was overlooking this objective right here. I don't remember if it's a Stormcrow or Nova or something. It did a pistol to damage. And she's like, so I did. And then she made her shots and we moved on. And at the end of the game, I was like, remember, sportsmanship points. I reminded you. I didn't let you forget. It would have been kind of a dick move for me to let her pass turn and forget that. And while I felt her list was very competitive and the game was very in her favor given the scenario, I'm still a good sport. Despite the list being rough and the scenario being rough, she was still a good sport. She had given me no reason to be ultra pedantic, right? Yes, she passed turn. That was a missed opportunity. That's her fault. But she had done nothing to make me play the game that way. She had not been an asshole to me. I'm going to be polite. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt, and I would expect that in return. After the game, I apologized if I had been cranky at all. It was game 4. We had all been there for like 13 hours, and I was tired. But this is one of those instances where you can play against a competitive list, but you have to remember that the person you're playing is not the list you're playing, and if they're nice to you, try and be nice to them and still remain a good sport. And grade them accordingly. So like, just because she had a tough list, a tough scenario, and I lost, doesn't necessarily mean that I have to dock her on, or in this case, her, in any case, it's the opponent, just in general, your opponent. But I'm not going to dock her on the sportsmanship or her list just because I lost. Like, I can't do that. It's not right. So I felt the list was good. So I gave her a 9 on the scale. I imagine she gave me between a 9 and 11. I didn't actually look, but I assume that's probably what she did. And I think that's probably fair. It's an average score somewhere in there. If she gave me below a 10, I think that might say something because she might have thought my list was stronger than I thought it was. If she gave me a 10 or 11, it was average, or she might have thought my list could use improvement. That's the way I would probably interpret it, but I'm not sure what that score was. But you have to be able to swallow your pride and be like, if you're scoring someone on sportsmanship, were they actually a bad sport, or you just upset you lost, right? So for me, I gave her the score I felt was fair, and then Bobby had us rank them sportsmanship, so that's comp score, and then had us rate sportsmanship on a 1 to 5. I gave her 5 points. I lost the game. She absolutely wrecked me, but she wasn't a bad sport about it. I played against someone last year who I had an absolute nightmare of a time playing, not because they were particularly good. Their attitude was poor. And that, like, once you're an asshole to me, I'll be very pedantic with you. That's the way I play. Like, if you're super chill, you're a takesy-backsy kind of person, you want me to allow you to have some leeway and flexibility, and you're going to do the same for me, we'll be cool. Have a good time. If you're rude to me, we will be 100% by the book. If you're rude to me and you pass turn, forget to shoot, that's a missed opportunity. That's oopsie on you. But Carrie was the toughest opponent I played out of all 6. Had, I think, probably the best list and a really good scenario against me, beat the crap out of me. She was still nice. List was tough. Maximum sportsmanship points because it was still a good game. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be. Had I played her in game 1 like I played Samir in the just straight up kill each other thing where you got points based on kills, I think I might have fared better. I wouldn't have had to have sacrificed for the objectives. I would have been able to attempt to shoot the infantry, which I did here. And kill-wise, by the end of the game, it was a little closer than the score would show. But the score is what mattered. The score for objectives mattered, not kills. In the kill thing, I might have fared a little bit better. But for objective scenario play, her list was very good, and that was rough. So, good game. Carrie, I don't know if you're listening to this, but if you are, cool. I appreciate you stopping by. DRD, which is the company I work for, we've also given her some material for using. She did a charity event for, I think it's the Trevor Project. So I think it has to do with like LGBTQ suicide prevention type thing, if I recall. Stuff like that, and we have supplied some material. So when I met her there, she gave me a patch, which is in the other room right now, but I've got a patch for her little podcast. So it was pretty cool. Hopefully that all made sense. I realized that these sketches are kind of, out there. So going into game 5, probably my maybe second favorite game of the event. Samir was a lot of fun. Carrie was really tough. Kevin was really fun because he was just fun to talk to. David was fun because it was a mirror match. Mason was a lot of fun because he was a lot of banter, and I got to help coach a little bit. And then Matt was just cool because he was cool. So honestly, At that point, all good games. Matt probably had was a good game. He played in my Nova event, but our setup, our game was probably my second least favorite scenario. Fun opponent, least favorite scenario. So we played on a 4x4. Standard 8-inch deployment. I'm not going to draw the lines for this one. Single objective in the middle, and then we had these gates surrounding it. We basically deployed kind of like so in these little boxes overlooking this. This was King of the Hill with laser gates that looked like this. And they had this protrusion where like a mech silhouette could, stand behind it. And it would block line of sight or provide cover, and Bobby had us rolling to see if these turn off or on. I didn't like this scenario because at the end of every turn, you score 1 point for every mech you have within 3 inches of the center of that, which was almost the full radius of this, regardless of if your opponent was there. So it was really a mosh pit encouraging you to throw everything in there, which means that we had 375 points, and we were playing in a basically like 12-inch circle. That might have been a 6-inch diameter. I think it was 3-inch radius from this, 6-inch diameter, and then I think it was 3-inch or 12 inches across on the shield things. So we had all of our mechs in here. We were fighting. He got ahead, and it was pretty brutal. I couldn't do much about it. I lost a mech on turn 1. I got ahead on points on turn 1, but lost a 50-point mech doing it. And then on turn 3, I called it. I had 3 mechs left, I think. No, I think I had 2 mechs left. Basically, I was like, hey, man, I'm not trying to be a dick, but, like, I'm calling it. Like, game's over. You have, like, 4 mechs left. I said, statistically, if we can agree on this, I think I kill this mech here that's almost dead. You promptly kill my other 2 probably the next turn. You have 3 models left. You have this many turns. This is how many points you're going to get. You got it. And we tallied it up. And I'm like, I'm not going to have fun knowing that the game is already over. And that comes from me trying to play volumes of games in the past. I don't want to spend time on a game that's hopeless. Some people will, and I get it, but it had been a long day the day before. This was really early in the morning, and I sleep poorly. I usually don't go to bed till between 2 and 4 a.m., and when I go to work, I usually don't get off till 2, 3 a.m. And this was first game, day 2, and this was 8:30 in the morning. And this occurred, this scenario. We never rolled for the gates to turn on or off because we were inside of them fighting and they didn't matter. The rest of the table didn't matter. And so we were fighting in here, and I hate having to concede with someone, but if it's checkmate, it's checkmate, right? I was not going to have fun rolling the dice anymore because there was 0 chance of winning. The only chance I would have at winning is if he missed everything multiple turns in a row. We're literally at short range, 6 inches away or less. All of his stuff has decent skills and decent damage. It was a triage situation, and I couldn't do anything. It was over. And then he was real polite. He's like, hey, if you're not, you don't want to play, I'm not going to force anyone. It's been a long 2 days. We're good. And so he was a good sport about it. I apologized to him. I didn't want him to think I was trying to be a dick. I just, there was no point. Like, the game was over. He already had it. We already knew where the score was going to go. It's done. But what we did do, and this is kind of a repeat of my game with Kevin. Right? So, flip side, like, Kevin knew early on what was going to happen. He probably wasn't going to have fun or wasn't going to be able to win. And there wasn't going to be much enjoyment fighting an uphill battle, knowing that the loss was already there. And that's how it was going to be here. I knew it was going to happen. And, I'd rather just tip the king over and you got the game, let me just relax. I'm going to sit down and just relax, for a little bit because I'm tired. But instead of just sitting there, we talked shop about the scenario. We talked shop about Nova, because he was at Nova in my event. We talked about points. We talked about my scenarios for next year, my points for next year, and so forth. So it wasn't wasted. Super cool guy, and ended up adding him on Facebook afterwards. But he was a good sport about me feeling like the game was over and didn't push anything. And then, so this is where I'm a little different. My situation with Kevin, I called it. We were good, or we agreed to call it, and we had points for points' sake that were there. On this one, because I was conceding, I literally said, it's this turn. If we can agree, I kill this 1 mech at the end of next turn. I think you kill my other 2 mechs on that turn that you've tabled me. There's X number of turns left in the game. You would have this many points by the end of it. Here's your point spread. And he's like, that seems fair. And I'm like, cool, let's write it down. Let's get the scored tally. If he wanted to push for points, and I wanted to concede. I don't want to deny him his points, right? So I went ahead and tabulated it. We didn't do that with Kevin, but I wouldn't push him for it because that's not what I was there for. So Matt also didn't push the issue. I just went ahead and just said it because it felt fair. I'm conceding day 1 or day 2, game 1 of day 2. Maybe I felt maybe I was denying him fun by not playing, maybe in a poor sport. I want to make sure he got max points. I'm always worried about someone's perception of their interaction with me. I don't want it to be poor, so that I just went ahead and got out ahead of that. So going into game 6 with Mason. So this was the last game of the 2 days. We're on a 4x4, obviously, and we had objective here, 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 and here. He deployed most of his mechs kind of over on this side. He deployed 2 hovercraft here, and I think his ice ferret. I did kind of the same thing I normally do. I have a central deployment knowing that I can threaten all 3 of these objectives. And then I had my fire moths off to the side so that they could run up and do this. And then I had one, the 30-inch one, if he sprints, that's 45 inches from deployment. He can go from here to, there if he wants to. He's got the whole table. Which is what ultimately happened. He positioned his mechs in such a way no one could see back. I had the fire moth come up and deny scoring on this objective. This one came in, denied scoring on that objective. And my storm wolf ran up to the middle to score. And then I held these 2. And he put some fire in on my my storm wolf in the middle. End of turn 1, I had deny. Actually, no. I think I sent both fire moths here on turn 1 because I was worried about that. Because I think I lost a fire moth on turn 1, but I believe on turn 1 we ended 3-1. And we ended up to a point where I was always contesting at least one of the points, and I was going up by like 2 points a turn to 1. And then this is also the game where I moved that fire moth, the remaining one, back and forth, like to this point, moving around to deny him, and made him try and fight for the middle. And this is the game where this storm wolf that he really wanted to kill, I think it was on turn 3, I moved the fire moth before the storm wolf, and he was waiting for me to move this to deny, because like he has an 18-inch move, so from this point I could jump here or here, wherever I want to go. He was waiting on it. I moved the fire moth first, and that's when he was like, oh my god, you've been moving it last every turn. I thought you were going to do that. Why didn't you? And I was explaining it to him. But this was a good game. Other than this, the scenario setup was pretty standard. You scored points end of every turn. You got points if the opposing highest point damage model or highest cost model was down. He spent his last turn shooting at my Timberwolf, who was hiding over here, kind of notched behind some terrain, providing overwatch on this objective. Spent a whole turn shooting at him because there was a water feature here. And he had moved up with a Grendel here, and then was an Executioner or something else. I forget what that big mech is. Gladiator? I don't remember. It's some clan mech, big mech. And he was firing down on my stuff, and I didn't want it to die because he would get a point. Bobby calls time. And normally when Bobby calls time, you play to the end of the turn. I knew what I was going to score. I knew how the game was going to end. And I was like, hey, bud, like he called time. You've just finished attacking with these. Like the turn's going to be over. And he wanted to continue shooting at my Timberwolf just to see what would have happened. And I was cool with it. It wasn't going to change the game. But he shot with everything on that model. And out of, I think, 20-something damage potential at medium range, needing like 7s or 8s to hit, he got like 3 damage. It was astounding how bad it was. But this was a fun game because I was able to help coach him. So right here in the middle, he had made some blunders with his hovercraft, moving him around. He did try and hold this objective, but unlike the game with Carrie, when I played with Carrie, and she shoved these objectives right on early turn 1, she threw everything at it, and I have to kill it or she scores. Like, that's just what you do. He didn't do that with his hovercraft. He played a little bit conservative. And then when he did do that, I was already ahead and I was able to shoot them, but he left a 65-point Ice Ferret right here. It was his most expensive model. He left it there, a bunch of damage just hanging out. And then later in the game, I was like, hey, Mason, like, do you want some advice? And he's like, yeah, what do you have in mind? And I said, here's the deal. You have 1 hovercraft left with an infantry, and you have this Ice Ferret. I was like, you can rotate, and you can bring this hovercraft, wherever it was, from here back to this objective and free up the the Ice Ferret to fire at stuff and move around. I said, now, my Fire Moth, which was here at the time, I said I could intercept, come over and shoot at your transport. And I said I likely would do that. That's tactically probably the best idea because I could kill that with this fire moth at this point. I said, however, I'm equally happy to let you leave a 65-point fire ice fair, yeah, in the back, not shooting. I'm happy to let you do that. I said, you're out of a 375-point game, 65 points of yours hasn't made a single shot the whole game. It's sitting here. I was like, I think tactically speaking, moving that hovercraft over and playing the odds with the Team M and getting your ice fair into the battle to get that damage to make points back makes the most sense. So hopefully you learned a little something from that because when I throw my fire moths out, no one wants to lose material. I don't want them to die, but my fire moths are cheap. Their deployment system for my battle armor, and both of my fire moths were less than 20 points. If they die, it's fine. If they're running around the map running away from me, that's fine. If my Timberwolf at 66 points for a 7.70 is hiding on an objective the whole game at full life, never shooting, I might as well be playing a 300 point game versus 375. You know what I mean? So that was one takeaway that I was trying to impart upon him, was like making sure if you're doing something with a mech that you're not taking out of the fight inadvertently. So that was kind of cool, kind of a coaching moment for him. I also got to talk to his dad after the game, which was a lot of fun too, just giving him a point by point kind of blow of how the game went, and then the cool swag stuff that I gave him from DRT. So but that's a breakdown of my 6 games. I'm aware that my doodles are kind of goofy. Hopefully all of that makes sense. What were my overall experiences at Southern Assault? I enjoyed it. I think the prize pools were fantastic. Bobby ran a great event. I think the caliber of players this year, in terms of sportsmanship, was higher. We had more players, more chill people. I think less than 10% were hyper competitive, and the hyper competitive were at the top. I think Carrie's list was fine, or competitive rather. She was nice, but she finished first, and I didn't expect anything less. And then number 2 was Josh from Mech Bay, and I didn't expect anything less. Like, if anything, they could have flipped. Josh won my event at Nova. He was first place, and that's expected. He's an intense player, plays a very competitive game, had a competitive list. So I expect that. I expect the higher competitive players to be in the top. I'm shocked I made top 10, if I'm honest with you. However, if you go to this event, your odds of playing that top player or top competitive players, the odds are there. But after the first couple rounds, depending on your pairing, you're going to start to get intermingled with the more casual, chill people, while the competitive players start to rise to the top and have to play each other. The reason that I had to play Carrie was that I had going into game 4, I was 2-0 or 3-0, right? And then I lost to Carrie, so I was 3-1. I lost to Matt, I was 3-2, and then I played Mason, and I ended the weekend at 4-2. Because I won 3 in a row, I ended up having to get paired against one of the more competitive lists. And that happens. But if you go and you're a more casual player and you go like 50-50, you may play against one of the competitive players. You might not play against all of them. So if you are on the fence about going, don't let the competitiveness be a deterrent. Also know that Bobby's list restrictions this year were more inclusive or inviting for casuals, whereas last year it was wide open and there was some pretty cheesy stuff. This year I feel was much more tame, at least from what I could see. So that was fun. The prize support was fantastic. We had some really cool autographed prints this year. I got one from Anthony Scroggins with Wolf's Dragoons on it, autographed, which was pretty dope. Again, I gave my models to Mason because I didn't need them. And I also got a trophy for Best Hobbyist. I missed out on Best Painted Army this year by one category. And Dustin from Mech Bay got it and can't complain with that. So basically, when they said it had to go to like a tiebreaker of a tiebreaker type thing, I was like, oh crap, I think it's me and Dustin, because I try to be humble, but I felt that if of the painted stuff there, I felt it was going to come down to me and him, my gut instinct, and I was right. I was talking to Austin, who helped judge it, and he was giving me feedback on what happened, and I was like, yeah, man, like I expected this. And then announced Best Painted, and he got it. And then the award right after Best Painted was Best Hobbyist, and he called my name, and I'm like, that tracks. Because if I got Best Painted, I think that Dustin would have got Best Hobbyist as well. I think that's the way that it landed. But that said, there's some pretty good honorable mentions there. Everyone had great painted stuff. Matt LeBaron's stuff was fantastic. His Sea Fox stuff was great. I didn't actually get to see Josh from Mech Bay stuff. I heard he was running one of the Ares class assault mechs. I didn't actually get to see it in person, but his stuff at Nova was good, so I'm sure his stuff at Southern Assault was great. And then Samir's Jade Falcon display and models were great. I think if there was anything scoring wise for his, it might have been that his display was just so massive. This thing was like a monument, but it was super dope. But yeah, there was a lot of really nice painted stuff, and even the more like casual artists who might have been new, their stuff all looked great. I don't think there was anything of note last year that was like, oh my god, no one painted their models. But I think the caliber of effort people put in this year for the painted stuff was definitely above last year, and that's not required. But I feel like, and this is my gut instinct, I feel like everyone who was at Southern Assault this year, if they were there last year, they wanted to enjoy this experience again, so they put that extra effort, I feel. And then I feel like we got some new fresh blood, and based on the list building restrictions and the way the event was organized, I think that was conducive for a more hobby-centric environment. So I know that there are some people in the Battletech community who are not interested in painting, but and maybe if that's the case, maybe the competitive scene might not be for you since painting is required. But I do think the people that were there, even the ones who might have been there for more competitive reasons, still had nice painted models, and that was great because hobby for me comes first. And I think every game I sat down to play, I feel like everyone put in good effort, even if they were paint schemes that weren't to my taste, like, oh, I don't like that color because it's not for me, but someone else might not like Wolf's Dragoons because it's not for them, but I could still appreciate your art, you know what I mean? And that was cool for me. So that was fantastic. Bobby did a hell of a job, and if you guys are on the fence, come on out next year, give it a shot. I think it was like a $30 or $35 entry fee. Everyone gets a shirt, gets free models, free swag. Really good, really worth the investment for the experience. It is a grueling 2 days, I'll tell you that. And keep your eyes peeled. I think I may be working with Bobby on maybe running something on behalf of Fortress at Nova 2023 in September, and then he'll turn around and in November next year run Southern Assault. So toying with the idea of calling it Northern Assault for Nova because it's Northern Virginia, Northern Assault, and have that on behalf of Fortress, hosted by Death Ray Designs, which would be me hosting that event, and then invite those players down to Southern Assault 2 months later for a repeat or the larger games. So we'll see how it pans out. If you're interested in that and you're in the area, keep an eye out. Yeah, I'd love to see you guys out there. But that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you made it this far, hit the like and subscribe button, sound off in the comments below. Let me know what you think. If you got to meet me at Southern Assault and you had a good experience, sound off, let me know. Feel free to add me on Facebook, check me out on the Discord channels, we'll chat. I did get to meet up with Jonas and talk about painting, give him some tips on painting red. In the future, it would be cool to do some painting classes at some of these events. Maybe that's something to talk with Bobby about, to have a limited number of potential students or something to teach some painting techniques, because I got a good background in that. So who knows? But that was cool getting to talk with people. And if you're listening to this, big shout out to Dan, the guy who runs the Capital Palette at Nova. He brought my Nova Award from there because I couldn't get it while I was there. So he brought it to Southern Assault for me. I didn't get to play with him, but got to spend a lot of time chatting, and he was pretty cool too. So with that being said, folks, I've rambled on long enough. It's time for me to go. Thank you so much for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed Southern Assault if you went there. Hope you check it out if you go there next year. As always, keep painting your models, keep rolling those dice, and I'll catch you guys next time.